Cool. Welcome all. Plan Stage Weekly for March 23rd. We have a couple things, I believe, but I lost my agenda. Sorry. Okay. So Martin's got a read-only team update. You can all read it just about his time off coming up and who to go to for technical writing coverage. And then down to Amanda. I'll go ahead and read through what she has here. I want to make sure we're aware of work streams between the groups which overlap and aid in a shared future vision. Product planning is thinking about how to consolidate filter capabilities across views, list, board, roadmap. And project management is thinking about how to create a grouping architecture. Should also apply across views. Both of these initiatives set us up to eventually create the concept of, say, views and queries. This is just the PSA to make sure we have an understanding of the ultimate goal and ensure we're talking to each other. Questions?
No, but on that note, it's not a question, more of a comment. Heinrich and I are communicating and working together on this to make sure that we are aligned, so it is covered.
Is the goal to make boards and lists support the same set of filters?
Yes.
Or to make them the same?
There is so it relates to my next point, which is the filtering consolidation update. You can have a look at the epic there, and basically I've done some sort of audit of discrepancies between endpoints for issuables, and I'll be working partially with Eugenia, and Heinrich will probably be involved as well, because of his knowledge about filters and the saved query stuff, to sort of like align things as much as possible on the back end, because there are a lot of differences actually. And then that way we can optimize the code on the front end to remove a lot of transformations and cater for specificities between the different endpoints, and so on. So we still need to create some back-end issues for this, which I know Eugenia is looking into. And I've created like some sort of like first iteration for the front end already. I've done a couple spikes and I created issues as an outcome for it. So there is like the simplification of like the transformation between token, URL parameters, and API parameters. And the other part is moving and unifying the fetching of token suggestions to the token components, so that we stop repeating the same functions and we do it the same way across filter bars.
How realistic of a goal is a board style view for the list page, like the board UI, but on the issue list page?
Are we talking about the saved views? Is that?
No, like you're on the issue list page, and then you have because the issue list filter, I think, from your table has the most mutually supported params, but then you could just say like instead of just displaying a list view, display that as cards.
Okay, so basically you would do like a switch view directly on the lists. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
like similar to on boards, we switch to like group by epics, basically.
Yeah, so like swim lane or board view or list view.
I don't see anything that should block us from doing that. I'm just not sure how it would look from the back end, because like, so the endpoints are quite different between lists and boards, and I'm not really even talking about the filtering here. It's mostly that we fetch issues at the top level of the project or the group for the list, and for board it's per list on the board. So you have like a set number of lists, and then based on the configuration of each of those lists you fetch issues that are within it. So the endpoints are completely different. But I feel like this kind of falls into what Heinrich is looking into, which is the saved views, where you could like configure your issues list to have like groupings.
Yeah. So basically, my idea is to start with save views for the issue list, right? So we're basically persisting a set of the parameters or the filter parameters that we currently provide that comes from the filter bar. We persist that into a row in the database and then add a name column or something to name this kind of save filter or save view, right? And the next step would be to be able to add a type or switch types for these views, because technically they should support the same set of filters, right? And then initially we'll have the type column, let's say list. So these are list views, and then we would support a type column core called like a board view, for example. And so when you open this view, we check the type. If it's a list view, then we load the view component for issue list and use the filter parameters and use the query that we do now. If we load a view and we see that the type is board, then we could load the boards app and then do the queries with the same parameters that we already saved in the DB. So that's kind of how I see us going.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Simon, are you mainly like, are you primarily thinking of a view within the what today is our list view that is more detailed than what it is now? So instead of right now, we're adding, like, we add all the metadata within issues to the list rows. Instead of doing that, having more of like how with like Finder, you can change from the thumbnail view to a more detailed view, doing something like that within issue view? Or are you thinking more just, yeah, getting swim lanes or group by and everything else that we have in boards into the list view?
That's
Good timing.
That's probably fine. That's the Finder view change example. That's a good one. Kind of more like that. Yeah, just being able to easily switch between a list view into viewing it. Yeah, like board column wise or something. Mainly, yeah, just not having completely separate sets of filters for the issue list versus the board page. That they have diverged so much when it's kind of displaying the same information, but just in a different layout. So that's all. That was so full stop. I didn't have any more words.
I mean, because now that the list views are in GraphQL, like they're using the same issue issue type in both boards and the list view. So there's probably not too many reasons why we couldn't update the view.
Well, like I was saying before, the structure of the queries though is different.
Is it?
But I don't think it's because
it's like a single list of things versus each of the columns.
Yeah, so the list is fetched at the group or project level, and on the board we have the list in between. But like Heinrich's been saying, it's probably not like, it's not a huge problem, because now that, I mean, once boards are full Apollo, which is a work in progress, we could just do a view, like we could do a view switch, and like instead of having a different route, we could have a parameter that loads the board app still. It would be like fake pretending that we're viewing the same set of data, but we would refetch them. We could refetch them.
Makes Makes sense. All right. Any other questions on filtering?
That was a super useful table on that issue. I think that was yours. Rory?
The
Yeah.
list of API
The
parameters and
separate list
filters.
of available ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good way to check.
It's a
Thanks.
yeah, and it's a good way to see where we're lacking things when we want to like build parity between all the different features. And I feel like it's also going to be useful when we build the different work item views and the tokens we want to use on work items and so on. Like I'm trying to unify what we already have, but I'm really keeping in mind the upcoming work on work items and trying to make it easier for us to implement it instead of like, again, building a brand new app, a brand new filter bar and so on. I'm trying to make something super duper reusable and modular and flexible so that we can build work items really quickly, basically.
Use the
I think
content
for
editor.
issue list and issue board, it's like, I think easier to make it, make the filter parameters like exactly the same because they're the same issues, right? For epics, it's slightly,
It's not that simple. I'm sorry. The problem
I mean,
is that we
simpler
need to
than the
pass.
epics. Because for
I would
epics,
say-
we also have to account for features that are not available, like assignees should not be used, things like that, right?
True. But like, it's not like the parity between issue board and issues list is not trivial, because as it's highlighted in that big table of parameters, we have differences and we don't have necessarily the same available parameters. And the other main difference is that on boards, we need to pass the filters at multiple levels because of the lists. Because we add a level of complexity with lists. So the parameters need to be passed and supported in multiple resolvers, which makes it more complicated.
Yeah, this is also something I'm trying to think about, like with save use, how we could simplify this on the backend side with a GraphQL, or like if we want to query these by the same thing we do now, where it's like under a board or under a list, then issues, right? Or versus like just do project issues with let front end figure out what the filter parameter should be for this list or something like that. I don't know if it's possible, or maybe not, because there are like logic where it's dependent on the list, right?
I like the concept theoretically, but I'm really worried about the complexity of building something like that. To be honest, like all the different use cases you would have to cater for on the front end, and how like what it would mean in terms of performance, like between the moment the response comes back from the API and the moment we can actually display something, because we'd have to do all these calculations about how do we group things together, where things should be displayed and so on. But like if we can formalize that idea and we could build a POC and see like with like a set of basic requirements and a basic backend endpoint and see how we can achieve that. I'm happy to explore it in a Spike or a POC and see how it goes.
Yeah. Because the other thing I also saw with boards is like there's this concept of a board scope, right? Which is also like complicates things, where like the scope is turned into filter tokens. This is like magic. And
can we not talk about board scope, please?
So yeah, that's one thing that I want to unify with save use too. Like board scope would not be something special. It would just be like the parameters in a filter. They're like
yeah, so board scope is just a saved set of filters.
Yeah.
And they are saved on the board. So when you load the board, it loads the filters and then it passes it to the filter bar. But like we could like this is a similar concept, but honestly I'd like to do it in a smarter way because it's painful to maintain, to be honest.
Yeah, because right now in GraphQL, the input for board lists and boards is issue filters, but then the issues query has its own set of individual
Yes.
filters that are
That's what I mean.
used
Like
as
boards is
inputs.
more complex because we need to pass filters in different resolvers to get the proper set of issues, like in each list, in each board. Yeah, it's not as simple as issues list. That's what I was talking about before.
Yeah. But so is there a reason we don't have like issues filters the object available as an input type for the issues list? I don't know if that makes sense what I was trying to say.
The set of filters is different, I think.
But should they be?
No. That's why I created this epic partial. Like it's one of the reasons, because we have differences. For example, like if I just look at that table, milestone title is an array, which actually caters for all, which is pretty funny. You could pass an array of milestones on issues list, which is not supported on boards. Assignee is named differently. We don't have assignee wildcard ID on each, like we don't have any of the wildcards on issues list except for milestone. Like we don't have assignee weight. We're missing iteration title. We're missing iteration cadence ID, epic wildcard ID. Like it's the set of filters is different when it should be the same.
Yeah, I agree. Is that what you were talking about, Heinrich, on trying to kind of consolidate that on the back end side, or figure out a way to, because even for like epic issues, like there's no reason why we shouldn't have the ability to filter epic issues by this same filter object or filter input issues filters input,
Yeah,
right?
technically the full set should work both ways because they're the same like issues, right? But yeah, I think we came to this state because of like the front end is two different like filter bar implementations, right? And then when we do like
I thought it was the other way. See, that's interesting because in my opinion, the implementation is different on the front end because we have to cater for the differences on the back end.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like a cycle now, and like
I don't know, like the egg or the chicken. I don't know which
we don't know which came
made the
first, but it's
differences
kind of
first.
like we're stuck in this scenario where both
No,
are
we're
different.
not stuck. That's why like I created the epic in that way where we look at the differences on the back end and we can unify both. I want to unify the endpoint and the set of filters and also unify the implementations on the front end. It's painful both ways anyway. So
yeah,
I think it benefits everyone to unify both sides of the problem.
yeah. What I mean is like we're in a state where the back end and front end is like split, right? Two implementations,
yes.
The back end, two implementations, the front end, and then when something happens, like for example, when I added the OR filter, right? And so I thought about it like, yeah, we need this in the issue list. I added to the issue list, and then we have to add it into the issue list front end, right?
It wasn't even added in the same way because I think it's on issues list, it's called label names and author user names with an S, and then on
it was intentional actually to be plural.
Yeah, but then it was added. The thing is, like, somebody else worked on the epic stuff and decided not to put an S to maintain consistency with the names of the attributes for just the normal filters that were already existing. So we have like that, we just added another difference between the endpoints, and that means on the front end we have to build different functions when we transform the API parameters, which is really painful. And I understand how it can be intentional, but like, because, and that's probably why Amanda raised it in the agenda. It's like project management added OR on issues list and product planning added OR on epics list. And the implementation is different. And I don't know like why there wasn't a conversation early on to decide on the standardization for the all objects so that it would be the same. And like every time someone implements something, not every time, but like in filters, you can see like someone implements a new thing and they make their own decision without consulting anyone, without looking at the, well, maybe we should define a standard, because there is no defined standard. So when someone implements, they can make their own decision. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to push for, so that we unify those.
Yeah, so I think it definitely makes sense to consolidate the different types within like issues and epics, like epic list and epic board filters. I think ideally those are consistent, and we work towards getting those consistent. I do wonder if we should spend too much effort into consolidating issues and epics, knowing that down the road they're both going to be work items. So I don't know if it's worth the effort to do that right now.
Depends where you want to spend the effort. The effort that you don't spend consolidating the back end, you spend it in building extra front end code to, like, you write extra front end code, and then it's more code to maintain in the future, because we have to build different functions on the front end. Like my goal would be to use the exact same transformation functions for issues and epics, because they are so close. And I want to use, like, build them so that we can use them with work items as well in the future. But because we still have those differences between issues and epics, I have to write different functions to cater for all those differences.
And to give you an example, like even on the epic side, milestone token, for example, is not same for epics list and roadmap, which are like both epic views.
They use the same, they have their code in common actually, but we still have to do like those teeny tiny differences. Like if you're on the roadmap, then you do things differently. It's a lot of code. Like if you look at one of my Spike merge requests, just trying to consolidate the transformation function, I've deleted so much, because it doesn't get merged, obviously, because there's too many differences to actually merge it. But that's not it. Like, it's insane how much code gets deleted, because all of a sudden the function is in one spot, instead of having, like, currently we have so it would be 3 transformation functions roughly, because it's to split between, like, it's filter tokens, API parameters, and URL. And for each implementation, so you have that set of transformation function, you have it for issue boards, epic boards, epics list, and issues list. And then you have it for anything like cycle analytics somewhere else, and so on, and branches and whatnot. But they do the same thing. Down the line, the logic is the same. It's just written differently, and it caters for those tiny differences. Yeah, so the Spike, I'll put it in the Zoom chat quickly. If the endpoints were similar, if you look at the diff, I add less than 100 lines of code and I remove almost 500. Just to give you an idea of code maintenance. Like, I'm looking at really long-term benefits here in terms of adding implementations. Like, we've been talking about, like, adding types of boards, adding more types of swim lanes, and now we're adding work items. And the way we filter all of these objects are the same. And I'm trying to reduce the amount of code we need to write every time we add one of those objects, or we add another type of filter in a token. And the way we maintain it on the long run, when changes are made, when, even for onboarding new people, like onboarding someone on filters is very, very difficult because it's so complex. And I'm just trying to make our lives easier for the long run, and to onboard people and to add more things. I'm sorry, I think I'm really repeating myself, but I care a lot about this.
Question.
Just to add, at one point in time in history, we had a single search implementation across GitLab, except for to-dos page. Like to-dos page had a bunch of drop downs where you would individually select projects, labels, etc. It didn't have tokenized input, but pretty much everywhere else across GitLab, we had a single implementation which had same JavaScript logic being used across filtering, and every page would have its own tokens defined in a HAML, and that worked out fairly well until we introduced view-based filtering, and now we have a mess.
I don't know if I agree with that one. The Hamel version of filtered search was that thing was
Not
a challenge to work with.
So I'm
Yes.
not saying that was good. What I'm saying is that as long as we had a unified implementation, we knew what we were getting into every time we would fix a bug or add a feature. But now we would have to really dig into the code base to see what flavor of filtering it is using before we can add it.
Are there many differences between the issue list query and a boards query for a board that has a single column of just open or whatever, like your unfiltered thing? What if we made
It
a
doesn't
board
change. It doesn't change anything in terms of.
so just showed the full width of your items in a kind of list view?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but the structure of the board's query is still the same, even if you have one list. You still have like your group or your project, and then you have board, and then you have lists, and then you have all your issues.
But is that then
So-
more similar to the single list view?
No, it's more similar to other boards with multiple lists.
Yes.
Well, because so aren't we going to
a better
reuse
point to aim for of making
fragment though at that point? Like,
Oh yeah, we reuse the issue fragment, but that's all we can do.
but then if we do reuse the issue fragment, how would we do that with epics then? Because we can't really reuse a fragment there, right? Because those like the actual
And-
data structure of those two, since epics aren't
We've
really
had
useful.
we've had that conversation when we built epic boards. A list on an issue board and a list on an epic board is not the same type, not the same resolver. It's totally different. The endpoint is completely different. It's the same structure, but the backend for it is completely different. It's like a completely separate Ruby file, basically. It's not even the same type
MR
of
boards.
object.
It's going to be great.
Can
Well,
we
so,
just
I
do
mean,
work item
and-
boards and like be done with it?
So I mean, because that's why, like, even right now between MRs and issues, like MR list view still uses the Hamel filtered search, I believe. And one of the reasons I think why that got why the Hamel filtered search got complex was because there is a decent amount of divergence now between MRs and issues. So you look at the
that'll
core
still exist with
code.
work items, right? MRs aren't going to be work items.
Off the right away, they're not going to be.
It would be
Maybe
nice if
someday.
they were, because it's like, again, assignees, milestones and such.
Yeah.
They would just
What
have
we want to prevent
a
is a
diff
whole
on top.
lot of conditionals in our shared code, depending on the type, the issuable type, or
We
the
could
work item
we
type,
could do
or-
extensions instead of conditionals. Like extend on our components instead of conditions, hopefully. And widgets should make it easier to compose. Like in my mind, the long-term vision for work items is that it's the same, like everything is a work item and you combine different widgets for different types. And in my opinion, like a page is a composition of all the available widgets for a work item. You just check which widgets are available and display the page based on that. And ideally, a merge request is a work item that has a diff, a pipeline and such, and they are widgets and they're like just a composition of those widgets. That's what I dream about at night, I suppose.
Yeah, I think if we did like epics, the move to work items, and then it would be an easier sell to the create team.
Yeah, I guess we would need to prove that. We need to prove and make it easy to migrate existing issuables to work items. Though they would have extra work in creating widgets that are specific to merge requests, but hopefully we make it easy to add widgets as well.
All right. Anyone else have anything else they want to talk about? No? All right, I will. Was I not recording? Where's the stop recording?